I'm Chris.
I'm Sandy.
And this is Parenting Autism. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 124 of the Parenting Autism podcast. Sandy and I thank you for carving time out of your day to listen to us. And we're here to hopefully brighten your day, give you some joy and hope on your journey with autism.
That was a good intro.
Thank you very much.
Well, usually at this point we'll say, what's on the agenda today, Sandy? And I will say, oh, let me see my list. But I'm actually not coming with a list today. So I did give you a heads up that please be prepared to speak today. And you're like, why? And I'm like, because it's going to be an interview for you today.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. So my thought was, earlier in the week, I really felt led that I should ask you some questions because we just celebrated Father's Day. And when we started this podcast, in part, it was therapy for me. In part, it was to be a joint conversation between me and you so that we could share a mom's perspective and a dad's perspective, which is what we've kind of continued to carry out the past several years. But I wanted to go a little deeper with you. And I know it's a little out of your comfort zone to talk so much, but let's just keep in mind today that there may be listeners who are not familiar with our journey, who haven't read our book, who haven't had a chance to listen to all of the 100 and however many episodes you just said. Mm-hmm. So let's just kind of start fresh. And if it's a little bit of a recap, that's okay. I think it'll be interesting enough that our listeners will stay tuned. And I also want to point out, I know I'm doing the talking here, so I'm giving you a little break, but I also wanted to point out that I do believe that there is probably a larger percentage of female listeners than male listeners, but I do know that a lot of the female listeners ask their husbands to listen to. So maybe this would be an episode that they could say, hey, would you listen to this because this provides a dad's perspective. And on top of that, I know that as a parent, I always like to hear somebody with autism speak because it helps me get into Bryce's thoughts and mind a little bit and why he does and says what, his actions. And I think maybe you can shed some light to some of the wives and mothers out there as to how their husbands are thinking, because men are generally wired a little bit different than women. That's why they wrote that Venus and Mars book way back when. So, that's my reasons. So, hi, welcome to the podcast. So, I really do want to go back. First of all, you are an amazing father, and I happen to know that because I have a front row seat to how you've been with Bryce from day one.
Thank you.
And I thank you for that because I also recognize that not every family has the same relationship that we have with our son, for various reasons, know. So I'm very grateful for you, and I'm so grateful that you're such a hands-on dad. But some of that really happened not necessarily by your choice, but by default. And so I don't want to go back all the way to when Bryce was born. I really want to start with the autism journey and how that kind of shifted. Because to bring the listeners to that point, when Bryce was 2 and had turned 2 and round into 2.5, that's when I began to notice that there was something a little off. We weren't sure if it had to do with his stroke or not, but we learned that it was autism. At the same time, my job went from part-time to full-time because of my discovery of embezzlement at the company. So my work life flipped upside down, and all of a sudden now I was working 5 days a week instead of 3 days a week, which made a big difference. And prior to that, we had worked together in our photography business, self-employed. So we were kind of joined at the hip for about 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I had felt led to go to the job that I went to part-time. And that was when Bryce was 1, because it came a little harder to manage our business, and we needed some income. And I know the Lord led me there for what I just said, because of what I discovered and how it helped the company so much. But it really started to create a different dynamic in our home, because we were no longer joined at the hip. And we usually, in our age group, because we're in our mid-50s, most of the time it's the men that was always the provider, while the mom was the primary caregiver. In this case, I became the primary financial provider while you became the primary caregiver. So can you speak to that and like how that made you feel at that time? Can you remember?
Well, I don't know if it's just the upbringing or if it's in the men's genes or what, but I think men naturally feel like that we should be the main provider of the family, right? My dad was, and, my grandpa was, and, back in the caveman days, the men would probably go out and hunt for the food, right? So it was a switch for me, and it wasn't, I don't know if it was a hard switch for me. It was in a way, right? Like, it's like, I need to be working, but you were called there, and it was obvious why you got called. And so I was like, okay, my job now is to take care of Bryce. My job is to do the best I can for him. And that included, everything that goes with autism. Doctor's appointments, which, you were able to make a lot of them, most of them, I would say, maybe.
Some. I would say some. So a lot of that fell on you. Definitely coordinating them.
Yep.
Fell on you.
Therapies, research, just doing the best I could, being a dad, and it's built this bond between him and I that's amazing, and I can't even explain it. It's just, is he doing everything I thought he would be as a dad-son relationship at this point in time? Through this time, no, he's not in any little leagues, and he's not in, the groups of kids that would be doing things together, except for Special Olympics now. So I think he's coming around now to participate in sports and things like that. But, he didn't live the normal childhood, I guess you could say.
Yeah, if I could chime in on that. I think probably from my observation, maybe the only, and I don't want to use the word disappointment too harshly, but you had a certain expectation and hope that he would be able to do Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts.
Yeah,
sorry.
Cub Scouts.
And that did not pan out the way that you hoped it would.
Yeah, so there's things like that just aren't a good fit for our family, and it may be a good fit for other families with special needs. I don't
Right.
You have to try it. You don't know until you try
which we
it,
did.
right? So, now I'm being able to do things with him, like go camping or whatever, and it's fun. He tried archery the other day, which was great. He's doing all these things that are just terrific, and it just warms my heart that I've helped create this little man, or groom him, to who he is now.
That's true. And so for the listeners, I mentioned Cub Scouts because that really was something that you're like, man, I really want him to be able to do this. I want him to learn these skills and, how to be prepared and take care of himself. And your goal was so that you could take him hiking and do sleepovers and things like that. When we tried it, it was during COVID, so we had that against us. But he really just wasn't quite prepared emotionally and
verbally,
cognitively, all of that for his age group at that time. So we tried it. But what did you do as an alternative to help him with that?
Well, I purchased the book, the Cub Scouts book, at his age level. So I'm just going through the book with him, and doing some of those things. Some things are like team building, so we don't have like a troop to team build with. But the other important things are getting out into nature and discovering things and learning things. And so we're doing that as part of homeschool. So that's good.
Yeah. So for those who haven't heard all of our episodes, even though you had a recent camping, give some examples of how you were able to teach him and use some of those Cub Scout skills on your daddy-son outing, your overnight outing.
Well, we built a fire, and I would say that the Cub Scout book, like some of the things that we've done, are measure out 1 square foot in your yard and discover what's living there, worms or ants or whatever you find in that square foot, identify what's in there and figure out why it's there, right?
Yeah.
And then another one was walk around your block and identify 3 different birds that are in your neighborhood. And, what songs do they sing? What do they look like? Do they live in a nest? Do they live in a tree? And things like that. So it's discovering, nature and the things around you. One was picking up litter. So we did that. And there's others too, but I don't know that we used any of those while we were camping overnight. But I did teach him how we build a fire, and he lit the fire. We went on a hike, and I showed him how trails are marked, and how to stay on the trail. And we also played in a river. And he had water shoes on to protect his feet. So he loved throwing rocks. So we were throwing rocks in the river, and it was just nice just for him to get out into nature and not worry about a thing. He wasn't asking for his iPad. He was just enjoying being outdoors and just discovering new things with me. We planted a tree while we were camping. So we were walking back to the tent, and I saw some seeds that had fallen, those helicopter seeds that fall from the trees. So I told him, I said, we could plant one of these seeds if you want to. And he's like, yeah, where should we plant it? So we looked for a place to plant it. And then I showed him, how we planted it. And so that was, those are all just terrific things that you hope you can do with your son.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that is that you are meeting him where he's at, and not trying to force him to be where you want him to be. Right.
I'm not, trying to push him to a level that he's not ready for, So it was very, very good. And it poured down rain that night, and he was such a trooper to stay in the tent with me, because before that would have been probably a meltdown, or we would have to pack up and leave. But at the end of the story, I'm the one that wanted to pack up and leave because it was raining hard and we were getting dripped on, and it was 45 degrees. And it was cold, rainy, wet. And I'm like, if I'm getting dripped on, then what else is getting dripped on? It was dark. I couldn't see. So, I don't know, it was 4 in the morning or something.
Yeah.
I said, enough is enough. So I got up and he was sleeping. I was so proud of him. He was sleeping, finally fell asleep. He's like, Daddy, how do I go to sleep? I need a fan or something. I was like, well, we're near the river. Just listen to the river, and listen to the things that are outside, that'll help you go to sleep. And he finally did, and that was great. And then we just packed up, and then we met you at the hotel. Yeah. So
I think that's all wonderful. Well, that's great. I want to go back again to where you were really his primary caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
And did it ever feel awkward to you, like when you had to take him to the therapies and you were seeing all the moms and you were probably one of the rare dads?
Yeah, that's true. I was one of the rare dads, but I didn't feel out of place. I think when you're in it, you don't really have time to think about it. Good. It's just you just do it, right? And it wasn't a big deal, me dropping him off versus, you dropping him off. It was just, I was talking to the therapist instead of you, and going to the doctor's appointments. And so, yeah, some providers were surprised to see me instead of you. But all in all, like they say in Cars, it was fine. I didn't feel discriminated against or anything,
Not too awkward?
No, it wasn't really awkward at all. It was just routine, and, I learned how to manage Bryce, and his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think looking back, God knew that you actually would be the better parent of the two of us for all of his medical appointments, because I feel like you are the researcher in our family.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that always takes out any instruction manual and wants to read from the beginning to the end before you put something together, where I'm like, hey, let's just jump in and we'll figure it out. That's how I'm wired, right? And when I listen to other parents talk, it's normally the mother who does all the research and dives all in.
Mm-hmm.
And in our case, it was you who was better suited for that. Not to say I couldn't, but I do think it came more natural to you. But I also do believe that because you had that upon you and you didn't have the mental breaks that I had, because I could go to work from 9 to 5 and my thoughts were consumed with cleaning up the mess that I was cleaning up, especially in the first year, where Bryce was, we were still trying to figure out heads from tails with autism and what do we do, and we didn't have that manual there. And I was at work without an instruction manual there, thrown into a job that I didn't interview for and was cleaning up there. I didn't get the escape from the autism reality.
Yeah.
Or, I did get it. You did not.
You would get the daily report.
Yes.
When you got home from work. Was there a meltdown? What was it about? Oh, beware of this. Don't say that.
How did he do at therapy? And, what did the doctor say? Where are we at on insurance?
Yeah. So when he would go to therapy and, a therapist would say, well, he's having trouble in this area. And I would say, okay, well, what can I do at home to help him in this area? And they looked at me with googly eyes, like, what? You mean you want to help him at home? Like, wow, nobody ever asked us this, right? So I'm like, wow, well, yes, I want to help him at home. I think a lot of people, they are busy with their jobs, and when they drop their child off, maybe they go to work or maybe they do something else or whatever. But, I want to know how I can help them. And so they would give me tips and tricks to do things at home, yoga or sit-ups or push-ups or, for OT or, he's having trouble hearing spelling or whatever, letters. So I'd work on letters at home. And So, and the same thing with the doctors. So I did a lot of research on autism. So when we went to the allergy doctor, I forget what he was called, ear, nose, and throat or whatever, when Bryce was having his exercise-induced asthma, right? I had done my research on it, and he's like, well, here, he's got exercise-induced asthma. Here's a pill. He's going to have to take it for the rest of his life, right? And I'm like, no. That's just not, it's not going down like that. And so we put our heads together and with my research, and we said, okay, let's remove dairy out of his diet. And poof, no more exercise-induced asthma.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a wide path and a narrow path when it comes to doctors, right? So the wide path is 90% of the kids, that present with what Bryce had, they'll be on a pill for the rest of their lives. But because I did my research and we figured it out, that's not always the path that you take. It's, and the other one, when I took him to the gastroenterologist for his constipation, he's like, well, you're just going to have to put him on Miralax, and that's the end of it, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to put him on Miralax for the rest of his life. Right. That's just, I'm not going to fill my kid with chemicals from a company, right? I need to find out,
unless he needs them,
a natural way to fix this. And we did with magnesium. And so magnesium is a natural supplement that he takes, and he has regular bowel movement. So it's like, yes, I mean, doctors don't fully understand autism unless you're sitting across from one that has a child with autism and that specializes in autism. They don't know what it's like unless they have their own research in their body of work. It's and so that's where I stepped in. I'm Dr. Chris, right? So, but at the same time, a lot of the doctors are useful when it comes to, okay, he's got an ear infection. Okay, well then maybe he does need an antibiotic
100%.
Or some eardrops, right? Or, he's got the sniffles. Okay, well, he doesn't need anything. Just let him go through it, So they are helpful in a lot of ways, and so.
Well, yeah, like when he had his infection in his leg.
Yes.
That we needed a doctor. So
that didn't go so well.
That did not go so well, but we did need a doctor.
Bryce did live.
And Bryce is still traumatized by Dr. Schiffman. Yeah, but so yes, I do believe that, again, God knew what he was doing with you doing more of that research, and especially during the more critical years, which are the earlier years. I know we're now, turning the corner and heading toward puberty, so I'm sure we'll have more things we need to learn during that time, and I'll be more involved with my new shift of schedule. But so going back there again, that was great with the research. Now, again, I'm talking to listeners who maybe don't know our backstory from the book or podcast episodes. But doing all the research did kind of set you up for more depression than I experienced.
Yeah. Well,
can you speak to that?
Yeah. I think, I've had my own physical issues with my feet, right? And I've been to, I don't know how many doctors to try to help me with my feet. And to this point, nobody's been able to help me after so many things.
In like 30 years, right?
Yeah.
To put it in perspective.
I've got so many inserts, so many surgeries, so many this, so many that. Nothing has touched my pain. So, here comes Bryce. Yeah, bud. We're doing a podcast. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, Annie.
We'll call you in if he wants to be on the show. So, I think that period in my life, which is the past 30 years, has taught me, doctors are well-intentioned, but they don't always have the answers, right? So I think my depression and the whole thing started way back when he's launching a missile.
Through our door.
Thanks, Bryce. Started back when you were pregnant and we went to the doctor and I said, look, I've done research and I don't even know how autism popped on my radar. I really don't. I said, but I'm concerned about autism and vaccines.
It's possible because of Storm and his autism,
Maybe.
and it did time
Maybe
to
that was on,
the time
that's
of
why
vaccines.
it was on my radar.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think we were able to talk to the doctor that day. It was
we weren't.
It was nurse practitioner.
Yes.
And she said, wow, I've done my thesis on this exact subject. And I can tell you without a doubt that vaccines don't have anything to do with autism. Not one iota. That's just all a bunch of hype. And I'm like, okay. And I put my trust in that person. And we had a discussion. And I said, up to that point, I did not want to vaccinate Bryce. I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I don't think we should be doing that just for a variety of reasons. And you're like, well, everybody else has been vaccinated and everybody else is fine. And, I think it's what we should do. Okay, Bryce. All right. Thank you. All done. So
I just have to say, Bryce has a game and he is launching nuclear
missiles.
Missiles, that's what it is. Missiles, and he's putting the sound under our doors. You may not be able to hear it, but we're trying to be serious here. Okay, go ahead.
So anyway, so long story short, we had the discussion. We compromised and agreed to have him vaccinated. And so when he came out, within the first 24 hours, they gave him the hepatitis B shot, I think is what it was. That's the first one that they give him. And I was in the room when he got it. I was in the nursery. You were in the room, and I had gone to visit him in the nursery. And they stuck a needle in his heel, and he screamed bloody murder. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I felt so sorry for him at the moment, but I'm like, it's okay. And so fast forward 18 months, we're at the doctor and Bryce is flapping where he gets his 18-month vaccines, right?
He wasn't flapping then.
Right.
Honey.
He wasn't flapping then. He gets his 18-month vaccines. Shortly after that,
it was quite a while after that. I'm not saying it didn't have anything to do with it, but I have heard stories where the next day there were issues. We did not have any changes, no immediate changes, no fevers.
Within 6 months.
But 6 months later, then things began, his sensory began to change, I would say.
So I'm not on here saying that vaccines causes autism, okay? It could be a coincidence. We stopped vaccines after that.
We have.
But
I do know where you're leading with this, because you said, if he gets autism from these vaccines, I will never forgive myself.
And I said that.
You said those words. So when he got diagnosed, those were some of the first words that went through my mind, hearing you say, if he gets autism from this, I will never forgive myself.
Yeah.
And I knew that you would blame yourself and that you would be primed for depression.
Yep.
And you did.
I think that's what happened.
I do too. I think that's why you dived as deep into the well as you did, because you felt responsible and you felt like you had to fix him for what you did to him by allowing that to happen. Even though we don't know that that's what caused it, you felt like you could have prevented it and you didn't prevent it. So you were mad at yourself. Mm-hmm. And does that sound pretty much
that was it. It was like, okay, is he going to do this again?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So, anyway, that was the tipping point.
So how'd you work through it?
I immersed myself in research. And
to work through your depression?
To forget about it, to push it aside, to try to get through it, I guess.
Yeah.
And...
Did you have to forgive yourself at some point? In your mind, in your heart?
Yeah, I feel like I have forgiven myself.
I believe you have, but I just wondered if there was like a certain point where you're like, okay, I got to forgive myself and move on. It's not your fault.
Yeah, I think it's when you let go and let God, right?
Yeah.
So God had this in his plan all along.
Yeah.
And Bryce is who he is because that's part of the plan. And, I love him so much just the way he is. He is a special kid, and he's taught me a lot of things. I've taught him a lot of things, and we have a great relationship. And it's good now.
It is good now.
So.
And I'm happy to hear you say that because, sometimes we think we're in control of things and we're making choices for Bryce, which is something we do daily, right? Because we still have to advocate for him in a major way. But at the end of the day, our perspective now is, how are we helping Bryce fulfill the plan that God has for him? Not what you and I have for him, but what God has for him. And I think we had to do a shift of our thinking as well. Like, okay, I know we live in the United States of America, and I know we have listeners throughout the world. And here in the States, sending your kid to college for an education is a major
expense.
But it's a major priority for a lot of parents.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're thinking about, from the day they're born, what college clothing they're going to wear, where they're going to send them, what they're going to be when they grow up, what they would like them to be when they grow up. And I'm sure there's probably some other countries like that too, but for sure, that's something that's kind of very common here in the States. You and I, we had to do a shift. Like, we don't know if Bryce is going to go to college. We don't know what he's going to do. I just started a list last week because he was watching vehicles being crushed on a game, and he was getting a kick out of it. And I was asking him why he liked that. And I said, did you know that's a real job? And then I thought, you know what? That's probably a job that Bryce could definitely do at some point in his life, right?
Yeah.
And I told you I'm going to start a list of jobs that I think Bryce is capable of doing, will be capable of doing. We'll add to that list. We'll subtract from that list, but not underestimating anything that he really wants to do or enjoys, and will, whatever he's capable of doing, which we don't try to underestimate what he's capable of. But I do believe that the most important thing, and we've come to agreement on this, is we're spiritual beings, and the most important thing is to teach Bryce about Jesus, about God, and for him to have a relationship with the Lord the best that he can. And so shifting that to where if we make sure we focus on that, everything else will fall into place. Because this life is temporary, we're focused on eternal life. And I think sometimes it would be helpful if parents, especially those who share faith, like we do and are believers in the Lord, that's that's what it's about, teaching them the best that they can. And we're going to be talking more about this, like what we're trying to do to help our church and other churches. But that's part of our parenting. And I think that can take you out of the funk, like what you were describing. Like, sometimes it's genetics that causes autism. Well, a parent shouldn't blame themselves if they've passed on a gene that was beyond their control. You can't control those things. And to blame yourself and feel guilty or feel responsible, that's not going to accomplish anything. You just got to try to do the best for your child. And, that would be the same thing if you married somebody. Let's just say that I had the gene and you didn't, and I passed it along. It would be terrible if you blamed me because I passed a gene onto our child, and this is kind of the same thing. We don't really know what causes autism, blaming anything or anyone, including ourselves, for missing something. There's some parents who blame themselves, and I've heard it because they were in denial and maybe they waited too long to get help that they felt might have helped them. You don't know that. You don't. So you just got to, start where you are now and help your child.
Each child has a purpose and a mission here on earth, and that's our job, is to help them discover those.
Yes. And to be what God created them to be. And I believe because God gave us Bryce when he did at the point in our lives, which was much later, he's given us Bryce for this purpose so that we can, help people and minister to people and encourage people. We wouldn't know, most of the people that are in our main circles right now, we wouldn't even know a lot of them if Bryce didn't have his autism. And God wanted us to meet the people that we've met.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about all that.
A lot of great people.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all that perspective and that mind shift. And I've watched you go from a really dark, low place to come back into the light, to embrace who Bryce is, to embrace your relationship with Bryce, the relationship with us, and to be where you are now. Now, one other thing I'll go back to, just because we're talking about the financial thing. So here was another big curveball, right? We get you through the depression part, and you were just coming out of the funk, which was great. And you were like, okay, I'm ready to go and get a job. Bryce is going to be starting kindergarten. I can get back in the world.
Yeah. I
can get back in society. I can start to contribute to the family's bottom line. Although I kept telling you, it's not all on a W-2. That's not always what's most important. But I understood where you were coming from. So you were in the process of interviewing, and you had like this interview through the church that was taking months, forever. And you were just waiting and waiting and waiting, and we thought you were going to get that job. And Bryce had already started kindergarten, and things are moving. And we thought, okay, we've made it. We're going to cross this bridge, and he's going to be streamlined into kindergarten. And 5 weeks in, we got the "Can we meet with you?" message, and I'm like, oh no, he's not going to make it. And you're like, he's not going to make it.
I knew it.
What are we going to do? I did too.
I said, we got to have plan B before we go to this meeting.
I know. And we talked about plan B, plan C. And I said, well, plan Z is homeschool. And I don't even know why I was so, I just didn't think it was going to work.
I don't
know. But God wanted plan Z. But then we knew when we got there, because we had to talk it through. And we're like, no, if they can't do it, we're not putting him in an autism unit. We're not switching schools. We're not going to put him through all of that. We'll make it work. And which happened to be in October.
Before COVID.
Yes. It actually was the end of September 2019, not knowing that several months later, all the schools would shut down. So God knew that was definitely the best thing for Bryce and definitely the best thing for us. But for you, I felt bad because I'm like, oh no. I mean, here you were getting excited. You were out of your depression. You were coming back. I was seeing my Chris again. And then this happened, and I was concerned. I was concerned that we might have a setback. So tell me what you were feeling at that time, like when we had to go into daddy school mode.
Yeah, so I had to dive back into research, right? So how do you teach your kid at home? What program do you use? Do you use a public school program? Do you use a homeschool co-op? Do you do this, do that? And so I really had to think, what is the best way that Bryce is going to learn? So I did my research. We picked a program, and we picked a Bible program, and we started at home. And then it was it was just a couple of days into it when Bryce told me for the first time that he loved me.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And I was like,
because he wasn't using sentences at that time.
He wasn't. And he told me that school was dangerous, and he really couldn't tell me why. But we kind of knew a couple of things that happened at school that
the alarms
in the music room and all that stuff.
It was loud noises.
It was a little overwhelming for him. Mm-hmm. And so once we got in a routine, it kind of turned into a blessing, because here I am teaching my son, how to do, teaching him, it's a big responsibility, and I get to be the one to do it. There was some pressure to, keep him up with the other kids and complete everything on time. But we got into our routine, and it just worked. It's you do school in between doctors and therapies. So, and then.
Well, that was the other blessing, because we had him out of private therapies at that time. Mm-hmm. And when we switched gears to homeschool, we were able to immediately get him back into speech one-on-one, mm-hmm. 3 hours a week, OT one-on-one, which was not just the school version, but the full-on gym and other things to help him. OT 3 times a week, and we were able to get the ABA services back in, which at that time there were quite a few behaviors emerging, and it was the right timing.
Yeah, so
that we wouldn't have been able to do had he been in school.
And I think we figured out that the public school therapies were lackluster at best.
He needed more. He needed more.
He needed a lot more than what they were providing.
That's true.
But
I think another blessing on that was also when the pandemic happened in late February, right? Several mm-hmm. months later, you were getting into your school routine, but it was the middle of March that our company went remote. We had mm-hmm. to lay off everybody, but I think it was 7 people we had left. Mm-hmm. And I was one of them because I was in charge of the finance. So I was busy, definitely working on getting government assistance, all of that. But I was home mm-hmm. and I was able to be here 7 days a week and observe and hear and, what was going on with his school. Mm-hmm. We were also able to schedule a lot of social activities. So I would finish my work at 4, and then people could come over and bring their kids. Mm-hmm. Once it was a month in and we were kind of cleared, we're like, we're not seeing other people. We're not sick. You're not sick. Come over.
You can go outside.
Yeah. And Bryce was able to have a really nice, active social life that otherwise he wouldn't have had. Mm-hmm. So for us, it was a real blessing and timed out. And I would think, you can speak to this, but did that help you, like, self-esteem wise, like to feel better about yourself, that you knew you were seeing accomplishments teaching your son?
Yeah. My focus on, a regular job just shifted more to him, and we knew that we could survive on one income.
Yeah.
It was, then it was, okay, we can make this work, and so we have, and now we're in a different season, and
we are. So fast forward, you did the daddy school, kindergarten, first, second, third, and most of fourth solo. So hats off to you.
Yeah.
And then I got my calling to help with fourth grade last year, which has been nice. And really, you're still taking the core courses, but we've discovered that once we learned Bryce had a few more challenges that we weren't aware of that were starting to show, you know, we've been able to double down on helping him with cognitive, with vocabulary, with reading, with his auditory processing. So I've helped to take that on, and we keep him busy. I mean, between the two of us, he starts in the morning. By 9:30, things are rolling, and his day does not end until 4:30 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I was
with some
right
breaks
there
in there
before you left your job. It was a full-time deal, like from morning to night. I was doing the typing and the music and the Bible and all that stuff, including the 4 core classes. And it was a lot for him. It was a lot for me to keep him on task, you know, but now that we've split it up to where I'm just doing the core courses and then you're doing like the electives, if you will.
Yep.
That has helped. And now I'm working, so it's just, I don't know.
And then you get that
balances out.
A little bit of a mental escape. You can go think about other things for, you know, a half a day, which is great. So I think, you know, it's all working out the way God's laid it out, but it's been quite the journey to get to where we are today.
Yeah, you know, it just popped into my head is autism's a lot like whitewater rafting, right?
Yeah.
So you're in the boat, which is autism,
okay,
and it's going to take you down the river whether you like it or not. And you got the paddles, so you can kind of guide it a little bit, but the boat's going down the river whether you like it or not, and you better be on board and guide the boat, right?
And then what happens if you fall out of the boat?
Then
no, for real, it happens, right?
Yeah, that.
So
could
we were
be
talking about that,
right?
yeah, and something I'd heard somebody talking about whitewater rafting the other day, and they said they fell out of the boat, and they're taught don't fight it, just kind of be still and save your energy.
Yeah,
and so maybe that's good advice too. Like don't fight the diagnosis, don't fight the autism. Don't try to make it go away because it just is what it is. Fighting it is only going to exhaust you, and then you'll have no energy left to help your child. But if you can find that place of rest, which we have found in the Lord, found that place of peace, which we enjoy, which we find in seeing life through Bryce's perspective. He has taught us things that we otherwise would have never thought about, wouldn't have learned, character traits, as well as just seeing things differently. And so I think not fighting it would definitely help you get back into the boat and be able to continue to steer the course.
Yeah. I would think of God as the water, right? The water's holding you up.
Yep.
It's holding your boat.
Yeah. And then think about that with that analogy. Let's say you do fall out of the boat.
God's going to catch you.
You're still in his hands.
Yep.
So don't just rest in his hands.
Yep.
He's got you. He'll keep you going down, and then he'll put you back in the boat.
Yeah. And if you pray about it, he'll guide your oars.
Absolutely.
To make the boat go in the right direction.
That's a good analogy, Coulter.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Anything else you want to add about being dad to our wonderful Bryce Coulter?
I love to see him excited. I'll do anything to see him excited. He's just, I like when his eyes light up and he jumps up and down and he's just happy about something. So it's
pretty much daily.
That's the highlight of my day when that happens, And yeah, it's just, I enjoy exposing him to new experiences and new things just to see how he reacts to it, see if he's interested, and we're just following his path too. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's good.
It is good. All right. Well, thanks for taking this time with me today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you sharing with the people.
I hope it's everything you wanted it to be.
You know what? I wanted it to be a conversation between us and something that would be helpful to listeners. And I think mission accomplished. Or as Bryce used to say, mystery cowboy.
Mystery cowboy.
Okay.
Roger that.
We'll wrap this one up. Happy Father's Day, belated, to all you fathers out there.
And happy birthday, Sandy.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Your birthday was this week.
Yes, it was. It was a
shout out to Sandy.
Wonderful week. Thank you, babe.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.